share friendship. We know who we are.
Welcome to Be the Wellness Podcast, where we help you master your body, mind, and the experience of life through insightful conversation, interviews with experts and thought leaders, all with a side of marital banter and some good old-fashioned humor.
Yes, we are your hosts, Adam and Vanessa Lambert, and we're committed to helping you live life fully expressed physically, mentally, and experientially. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. Adam and Vanessa Lambert are excited,
Yes.
both of us,
Very excited.
to bring you this guest today, Mr. Connor Moore. Mm-hmm. He's hilarious.
He's hilarious, and he's also authentic and genuine. And, you know, he's the host of the Realness Podcast, and he really does bring the realness.
Yeah.
When you're around him, you can't help but just want to be more authentic and just maybe overshare a little bit.
Yeah.
He brings out the oversharing in people.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. I mean,
Yes.
honestly, like as a trait, it's
Yeah.
not a bad one.
Absolutely. But yes, Connor, we had him on the podcast a few months ago, and, you know, we just really hit it off with him, and he's just one of those people that you instantly feel like you've been homies for a long time.
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
a familial sense of him. There's a way that he has just a warmth and just a way of like putting people at ease, which is pretty cool given that he's such a big guy, and you know, it's like
Yeah.
he could be intimidating, but he's actually like such a love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's pretty awesome. But before we get to him,
Yes.
let's talk about Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. Yes.
Yeah.
Costa Rica is our longest standing retreat.
It is. Yeah.
It is our longest standing retreat. And, you know, we've got this one pretty darn dialed in.
Yeah. It's such a cool country, and
It is.
it offers so much
It
in
really
one
does.
little package, you know. And it's one of the reasons I think we keep going back is because it's just a magical place. The people are awesome. The country itself is just like, I don't know, you just feel home when you're there.
You really
know?
do, yeah.
And I mean, that's been the case for you and I for a long time, but I think probably because we've been visiting there so much
Right.
for so long and
Right.
spent so much time down there.
Right.
But it's also something that we get from, you know, feedback from clients that we've brought down to retreats before is you're like, oh,
I get it.
I just feel like I belong here, you know,
Yes.
and like nothing against other tropical destinations.
Right.
But that's really not the case in a lot of places. You
Totally.
know? You're like, it's very clear that you don't belong there. You know, you're like, oh, okay.
One of these things is not like the others.
Yeah. And Costa Rica just has a way of kind of folding you in.
It really
And,
does.
yeah.
And there's just a special, there's always just a sense of awakening that occurs at those retreats. And it's not like, you know, the endeavor of that retreat is not to go in and create this, you know, big, you know, spiritual awakening or anything.
Right.
But oftentimes people leave with that because
Yeah.
there's just something about the space in Costa Rica, the way it holds you, the way that it just invites you in and helps you to remember like what's important to you,
Yeah.
and set down some of the things that aren't, and it opens up this new pathway to possibility.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a big playground, you know. It's like
It is.
there's everything to do there, which we do a lot of, you know,
Yes.
during the retreat. I mean, there's surfing and whitewater rafting and hiking in the jungle and waterfalls and you know,
Right.
all of this kind of stuff that are just like they're just fundamentally cool activities, and you get to go out and participate in all of it, and it's like it feels like super safe.
Yes.
You know, I mean, and, well, one, it is. I mean, we do a good job of, you know,
Making sure.
sure that it's that way. But
Yeah,
there's
right.
something about like, you know, I've certainly been hiking and been in places where you're like, man, this is like people die here. Like this is a sketchy spot, you know?
Right.
And Costa Rica just doesn't feel that way. Like you go
it's
out
warm and
you,
fuzzy.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like you get to go and participate. And I mean, and like even just surfing, like in you and I's experience, you can go to Costa Rica and surf some pretty big waves, and you feel safe.
Yes.
For some reason.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, at the
Yeah,
end of the day,
well-
physics are physics, but like, you know, you still can't breathe water, even in Costa Rica. But there's just something about it that you're like, yeah, no, this place has got my back. You know,
Yeah.
I'm here to interact with it, you know, and not like be in some sort of opposition to it, you know?
Yeah,
That makes
you're
sense.
not here to like dominate it. You're here
Yeah.
to like play with it, and
Yeah,
like there's definitely that give and take and like that push and pull of energy with Costa Rica that is present. And yeah, it's just such a special place. And again, it's why we keep going back. And we have, you know, all these awesome activities, all this awesome energy of Costa Rica, and then to top it off, we have this beautiful, badass villa overlooking the ocean with a private chef and all the accoutrements to just make it so deluxe and luxury, and all the, you know, all of that stuff is just so on point that it it really is buttoned up in a nice little package.
Yeah, you really can't go wrong with this place. I mean, every single room is an ocean view, and not just an ocean view, but like on top of the mountain overlooking the ocean
Yes.
view. You know?
And the cool thing is, you know, we've been in the same spot for the past few years, but we have a new house this year, and I'm really excited. And one of the reasons I chose it, this house wasn't available. That's a newer house, so I'm like, oh, okay, cool. There's some new options on the market, but it overlooks the ocean, but you can walk down to the ocean from the hill.
Right.
And so, you know, that was one of the things about our old place was amazing, but it was a little far from the beach, so you couldn't pop down. And so I'm really excited that we'll have access to go right down to the beach and, you know, just be able to go down anytime you want. Anytime you have some spare time, maybe we can do some meditations down there. It's just going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And we have a new partnership with Affirm.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need help with, you know, making payments over time to create your plan to make it easy, we now have that partnership with all of our events, which is so awesome because now the flexibility is all in your hands, and no longer do you have to depend on us and our payment schedule. You can go create your own and just, you know, choose your event and get in.
Yeah, it's cool, and it's a super simple process. You can just go to our website, and there's links to it all over the place.
Yep.
And you can just pre-qualify. It's not a hit. It's nothing. You know, just hit the button. It'll pop up a little thing, and you can go through their process, and it'll explain the whole thing.
Right.
And just see if it's, you know, see what the possibility is.
Right. And when you say it doesn't take a hit, what you mean is it doesn't actually affect your credit score.
Yeah. You can, go take a look, see how the whole thing works out. And it's not like you're, you know, applying for a new credit card or whatever.
Right. It's different than that. Yeah.
Right.
Which is really cool because that's always a big concern for folks is like, oh, I don't want to take out another line of credit. But this is actually doesn't work in the same way. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So anyhow, Costa Rica is going to be badass. We hope you're there. And there's still some space for both individuals and couples. Mm-hmm. So, check it out, see what's up, and come join us in Costa Rica.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic.
Yes. Now back to Connor. More importantly, back to
More
Connor.
importantly, yeah.
So I want to just read Connor's little bio here because it really just sums him up.
Good.
I think it's just on point. And it says, Connor's the host of the Realness Podcast, lifestyle design and dating coach, founder of Realness Retreats, and an avid authenticity advocate. He brings a lighthearted and somewhat irreverent voice to personal development with an intention to help people take themselves a little less seriously, create real connection, and live the fuck out of life.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yes. So without further ado, let's get to the good stuff.
All right.
Here's Connor.
And we're live. Welcome back to the podcast, Connor.
Hey, man, I'm glad to be back.
Yeah.
It's been just about a year.
Has it really?
About a year, yeah.
Whoa.
I think so.
It was like 2 blocks from here when I decided I wanted to move to the West Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah. The same time that I came down to interview with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. That was like, I felt like it was all meant to be. You just circled right in and it was like, all right, this is happening.
You definitely encouraged me. You're like, you definitely belong here.
Yeah, I
was
could
like, okay.
feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were walking around and it was like, you could just feel, I don't know, there's just a certain sense of like when somebody embodies the West Coast vibe. And I was like, yeah, this is your space.
Totally. It was so funny because I lived in Austin for so long, in about 8 or 9 years, and I'd been in Texas my whole life, and I'd never spent much time out here at all. Mm-hmm. And when it hit me that I needed to live on the West Coast, like I needed to get out of Austin for one and just change a little bit. But the way that I was seen and just communicated with, I think it was strange. It just was strange.
Yeah.
It was so much different and so refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that can happen anytime you make a change, right? Like there's just something about stagnation in general. And I think that like sometimes we just, wherever we are, we just long for a new energetic frequency, a new input, you know? And it's like, I think that yeah, it's important every once in a while just to pay attention to that call of like, oh, I need to change my physical location to experience a new frequency.
Yeah, someone actually that along those lines was talking about pulling a geographic is what they call it. It's actually a practice in addiction treatment. So it's like getting away from everybody that knows you. And they drew the analogy. It's like wearing a name tag for every job you've ever had, and then walking around trying to explain to people what you do.
Yeah.
Because they see you as that person. Like in Austin, I'd been the CrossFit gym owner and the athlete, and then the on-it guy, and then it's like all the different things. And then a handful of guys, I was still the frat guy from college.
Right.
So it was confusing. I could walk into Whole Foods and I knew 8 or 9 people almost every time I walked in there.
Yeah.
And I had to almost be a different person all the time, and I was just ready for a different start. Like just to walk and just be like, you know what, I'm me now.
Yes.
This is just me.
I'm integrated. Yeah.
I'm excited.
That's a really good way of looking at it, though, is the name tag thing, because that's God, it's so true. And people, in fact, I think we even talked about this the last time you were on. People like to just sort of pigeonhole you into whatever they're comfortable with, like whatever role they're used to you being in. They're like, no, come on. Like if Connor's somebody else now, then what does that say about me?
Exactly. I like to draw the analogy too of if you watch Friends and then all of a sudden Joey just starts being super responsible and getting his shit together, like it's not as good. You just can't change in the sitcom of your friends' lives. They can't just change their whole entire dynamic because you have a character that you're supposed to play. Like you're the person who's like always complaining about their boyfriend, or you're the person who does this thing. Like if you go do ayahuasca or whatever we're talking about and completely change your perspective, it's really hard for people to adjust to like, hang on, what do you believe now? Because I'm accustomed to your other beliefs.
Totally. Most importantly, though, what is your current animal spirit? That's what I'd like to know. We're about to find out.
Just based upon like current. I mean, we're gonna find out from your cards.
Yeah.
But
Do you have one? Oh yeah. Let's hear.
So I've got 2.
Okay,
but
let's hear.
one primarily is the black jaguar.
Ooh.
That's legit.
Yeah, it is legit. I was actually kind of excited about that when it happened, and that happened in Peru, and I wasn't even on any drugs at all. It was tobacco. We had a tobacco ceremony, and it came out of nowhere because I always resonated with like elephants and bears, never cats.
Yeah.
What was it about the jaguar? Like, what was it in that moment that downloaded for you?
Pure focus and pure confidence. But they're also really playful. So actually, over the week that I was there, it ended up making more and more sense because, of course, I started learning about jaguars and then researching jaguars and especially black jaguars.
Nice.
And it was something that they're a really playful animal, but they're kind of solitary.
Yeah.
And which makes a ton of sense for me. But when it comes down to hunting or doing things that are vital for survival, they're so incredibly focused.
Yeah.
And that was something that I noticed about myself in my whole life, really. I mean, I used to get my teammates in football, and I played football into college, so frustrated because really up until the game actually started, I just played grab ass the whole time. Like I took nothing seriously. National anthem, I was making jokes. I was like talking about sleeping with your sister when I was like in the national anthem. Like I just wouldn't take anything seriously until the first huddle, and then it's like, okay, now it's actually game time, and that's kind of how my whole life is. Like I really value not taking things seriously that don't need to be taken seriously.
Until it's time to. Yeah.
Dude, that's
I
fantastic.
can appreciate that.
Yeah. If you can do that, I think you're steps ahead, And so you talk about all the chronic stressors and all of the shit that just hammers on us all the time. And that's fundamentally the difference, right? It's like if it's game time and you're freaking gazelle, game time for a gazelle is getting chased by a lion. It's like you're just cruising around doing your gazelle shit, and then the lion comes and you get away, and then you go right back to being the gazelle. I don't know. I think that should be cultivated in people.
Oh yeah.
Is your other animal a gazelle by chance?
No. You know what's funny about gazelles? I saw this the other day. Somebody's talking about this. I don't know if it was gazelles, but one of those hooved animals in Africa. Is when they see a lion approaching, they'll start jumping really high. And start hopping and saying basically saying, I'm really athletic. Don't fuck with me.
Don't chase me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's because it's a waste of your time.
Dude, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. I mean, because just watching the dynamic in Africa, like watching these lions that are like hungry. Now, I mean, fucking hungry, like ribs showing, panting, barely moving along, hungry. And they're sitting in the brush and they're looking at these gazelles and warthogs and all of the stuff out there that's like 100 yards away. Like their next meal is 100 yards away. And they're just like making decisions. They're like, it's too hot. That one looks too fast. Like, not going to do it, So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's legit.
Yeah, then they've got to be super efficient. People don't think that about predator animals. Like, they fail way more often than they succeed.
Absolutely.
So when they do succeed, it's super important. I mean, we've all seen the documentaries with polar bears that are starving to death and they can't catch a seal, and once they reach the point of being just emaciated and slow.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Unless you find something that's already dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this was like for us, just because we went to Africa this last summer or this last fall, and it was like such a poignant experience of the human condition, of the circle of life, rather. It was just like, oh my gosh, you felt bad for both sides, and you were like, so conflicted about who to root for, like who's getting chased and who do you want to win. But then you would find yourself oftentimes kind of rooting for the predator, especially the cats, because there's like 1,000 gazelles and there's this one starving cat, and you're kind of like, I kind of want the cat to win. I don't know. I feel really bad about this. It's really conflicting, but it really just tunes you into like the great circle of life. Like, we're all part of it,
Exactly. And that's one thing hunting has been really interesting for me as I've grown up. I grew up in Texas, and I don't love to admit this, but we used to just kill stuff to kill stuff.
Right.
It was we didn't even think twice about it. I used to also work in oil and gas, and we would just put it into the ground and not really think. Things that now I'd be like, whoa, I would never.
Yeah.
Like, totally crosses a moral boundary for me.
Yeah.
But now my hunting experience is so much different, because you think about that, and even just looking at the sheer numbers and whether you want to take part in the animal experience. And what I was actually standing in a tree in Texas, freezing my ass off, just waiting for deer to walk by.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking about this because I was actually listening to a Chris Ryan podcast while I was in the tree. That's what I used to do. I'd have one headphone in, so I could hear wherever deer normally walked by. I would have that ear open,
right,
and then I'd have an ear pod in the other ear. And I was listening to this podcast and just thinking about hunting in general. And I was like, I really do love these animals that I'm hunting. I think whitetail deer is what I was hunting at the time are beautiful animals.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of them. They're everywhere. But I do, and it was kind of conflicting, right? It's this weird. It is kind of sad every time.
It is, yeah.
And then I go, well, okay, I'm a predator animal, but I'm also not the top of the food chain if I'm out in the wild.
Yeah.
So if a bear or a wolf or a jaguar or fill in the blank was to eat me, was to kill and eat me, would I love that predator animal?
Yeah.
And I was to put myself on the other side. I was like, well, yeah, of course I would. It's just the way the game is played.
Right.
I'm not so self-important that I'm just food to something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't care about my feelings or what my podcast downloads are. Right. It's like, no, let's pass on this guy because he's got a really promising audio experience.
Yeah. Look how high he's jumping. Yeah. No, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. I mean, because I grew up hunting as well, and just like you said, killing stuff for no reason in the beginning, and then it's like at some point though, I think it's different, right? Like depending on where you hunted, because there's like. There's in California, baiting isn't legal, so you can't put up corn feeders and just sit and wait for animals to come, and so there's like aspects of hunting that I was never really like familiar with because it just wasn't part of the deal. Like if you're gonna go kill a deer in California, especially like where I grew up, you're going out and it's all spot and stalk country, so you sit somewhere forever and then you see something and then you stalk it until you get within range and then you kill it, and it's like it's a thing, there's nothing accidental about it, it's very much like it's a process that you're very much in, and then you're always eating the meat. Like this idea, in fact, I remember, it probably shows some level of naivety around the whole thing, but I remember being probably in my 20s and meeting a guy who was fundamentally a trophy hunter, and he was talking about, we started talking about hunting, and he was talking about I'm probably going to screw it up, but there's like the Big 12 or something when it comes to sheep. There's like so many different kinds of sheep around the world, and like there's a goal to kill one of each of them.
Yeah.
That he was like aiming for. And I was like, this is so bizarre to me, and it was the first time I really ever got tapped into that aspect of it, where it was like, no, the goal here isn't to eat this animal. In fact, if you're in, Tibet or wherever the, unicorn glossy horned sheep of the north lives or whatever, like the 12th one is, like you're probably not coming home with the meat, and it was like a really weird thing to kind of get my mind around. But that subtle shift in like why it is that you're doing it, and if it, is pretty critical, and I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like, well, yeah, dude, this the cat that's been stalking me while I've been stalking this deer doesn't give a shit. It's like he's fundamentally here to eat.
Exactly. It's like it's programmed to not really care about your feelings at all.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you've been doing some plant medicine lately, and we were talking about ayahuasca prior to going live, and I'm always curious to hear what people's experiences around meat and being a carnivore under the influence of plant medicine. Do you get any downloads around that?
Every animal experience I've had on plant medicine has been a predator animal. Mm-hmm. So for me, I do the best I can to eat wild food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's vegetables too. I don't really see, I think everything has a life and a consciousness in some capacity, even if we don't understand it. But it's more of an energetic thing than it has to do with meat or not meat or whatever, fill in the blank. Like I don't like palm, for example. Mm-hmm. I have more issues eating palm than I do eating, cage-free versus pasture-raised eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because the animal impact of the palm is much greater than what on my like value hierarchy is higher than chickens being able to roam versus not. I think orangutans, maybe I just have more empathy for orangutans.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you get, I'm sure some of your audience knows, but like the harvesting of palm and the deforestation associated with it is decimating the jungle. So for me,
terrible,
it's like, if that's it kind of gets more complicated than most people make it out to be. But one of my dreams is to be able to eat meat that I harvest exclusively. And in Southern California, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Come to find out. But friend, actually, the guy that I'm staying with here in LA, just bought a ghost town, and I think they have mule deer out there, and I have like the ability to go hunting again for the first time in a while. Wow. So I'm like actually excited about that.
Wait, he bought a ghost town?
Yeah, you glazed over that.
Yeah, no big deal. Casually brought a ghost town.
Small island.
So these guys got together, a handful of them, and they bought a ghost town.
Yeah.
And it was $1.5 million. Yeah. So the price of an apartment off Avid Kinney, probably.
Yeah.
But it's
a small apartment with no parking.
Yeah.
It's towards Mammoth from LA.
Oh, wow.
So it's in that area. And it's an old mining town that would just run down, and some guy's been living out there for 21 years taking care of it, and they're refurbishing it for just adventures and Airbnb and to create an opportunity for people to come out there and stay and hang out. They'll have fire heated hot tubs and Airstreams and
cool.
all. It's really, really rad what they're doing, but they saw it, and it was just one of those things where it's, hey, we could make a business out of this. And it's funny because it's a bunch of marketing and PR guys that are getting together and don't really know what the hell they're doing, but it's like, we'll figure it out, It's a reality show in the making, basically.
Yeah, but that's fun work, though, you know what I mean? It's like, especially if you're somewhat domesticated, like it's nice to be able to go out and do shit that's like, quote unquote man stuff. You're like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm just gonna figure it out.
It was funny because the guy that my buddy John Beer, he's been on my podcast a couple times. He's from the city, right? He's from Canada, but he's a city kid, And he just bought his first truck. Mm-hmm. He's like, he's always been a sedan guy. He's like, I'm never buying another sedan. He bought a Toyota Tundra. And I was like, it's funny because I have a mid-size SUV now that I bought because I always drove trucks.
Right.
We had this like inverse upbringing. And he was asking me to help him with some stuff out there. He's like, yeah, you're kind of like a mountain man, right? I'm like, I don't know, man. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Texas. Like I can like run a wrench and like swing a hammer. I don't know if I can like build a house. Like I think it's funny when you see somebody's like, what do you expect me to be able to do? Let me just get to the reality check here. But I'm excited to go out there and check it out. I think we're going out this weekend. So
nice. That's cool.
Nice to see a ghost town.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Before we forget though, do you want to pull these cards?
Yeah.
Let's do the cards.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
So I'm gonna let you can shuffle them up and
I have a process.
Do your whole thing.
I have my hippie process.
Yeah, go through your hippie process.
You know what? That is like a sign of something. If you have a process for pulling like tarot cards or animal cards or whatever, you're like, no, I got this.
Well, mine is like so subtle, like just like any other spiritual practice for me. It's just so subtle that I don't really want people to know that I'm doing it.
Got it.
All right, what do we got? Fish.
Ooh.
Never had an aquatic
creature. Is that a
creature.
humu nupu nupu apawa'a? It surely looks like one.
I'm not really 100% sure what you just said.
It looks like the Hawaiian state fish. But what does it say?
It says the fish is a sacred symbol to many people and has assumed the form of deities and other supernatural beings.
Ooh.
As a creature of the water, it is associated with feminine, life-giving energies and is often a character in creation myths. The trio, a tribe from the tropical rainforest of Brazil, tell the story of Paraparawa?
Okay.
Question mark? A fisherman who is visited by a spirit woman that rises from the body of a fish. The spirit woman shows Paraparawa how to cultivate plants and how to cook them.
Ooh.
To the Pesh Indians of Honduras, the nine-eyed mermaid Sierra... Dude, I'm so bad at reading.
I know, it's so hard.
Serena is the mother of all fish. The Pesh people would have special ceremonies before fishing and ask Serena for permission to take some of her offspring.
So what I heard in there was cultivating feminine energy.
Oh, man.
And I feel like that's kind of funny following along on the tail of like talking about how you're a country boy.
Yeah, it kind of is,
and
right?
like you just traded in your truck for a mid-size SUV. I feel like I can't just gloss over the connection there.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I mean, it has been a little bit different as of late. I feel like I've been maybe more accepting of my feminine. I don't know.
I actually feel like this is okay. So I feel like this is actually really perfect because I do think that there are parts of your femininity that you've been embracing more or just willing to look at. Even since I met you a year ago, I feel like there's a softer side of you that you're more willing to acknowledge.
Yes. It's actually, this is going to sound out there woo-woo. Y'all ready for this?
Yeah, we're
So I
ready.
was at a birthday dinner the other night, which by all accounts was actually super bougie. And I felt very comfortable there in my normal, high-end steakhouse in San Diego. And it was very normal. But I was talking to the woman across from me, being full on myself, just making jokes. Like she was asking what I was doing and what I do for work. And I just actually didn't answer the question, just like was talking about how I'm mostly avoidant and kind of a sociopath. I was just making jokes. But she did come to find out she's a channel.
Oh, perfect.
And she was just like reading my bullshit the whole time.
Yeah.
And then just straight called me out. And it was funny because in the context of just dating and connection in general, it's like I'm really kind of a softie.
Yeah.
But I don't let people see that unless I feel like they notice it beforehand. Mm-hmm. Like you have to almost get that out of me.
You're right.
Because I don't think it's guards up. It's just kind of the way that I live my life. It's like, I had this conversation with my roommate the other day because as I've started coaching people in dating and making relationships, I feel like she was talking about having an open heart. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't feel like it's my responsibility to walk around with my heart on my sleeve all the time and just try to hand it to people like it's an hors d'oeuvre at a dinner party, right? Like it's one of those things where if you see me and I see you, then the mutual respect and admiration of ourselves will come out in the process. And that's different than being walled up and having walls up, but it's one of those things that it's not sometimes I feel like when people get into, especially women in their like early 30s, when they're like really when you start looking for a relationship, it's let me see who I can just hand my heart to at any given point. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that's been accepting, okay, how much of you is being closed off versus how much of you are you just self-rationalizing, or are you really actually open to creating connection?
I think though that there's an interesting sort of a process that occurs when you're past the dating part, where you're then again more open to let's wear your heart on your sleeve again, because now you're not worried. You're not completely handing it over to anyone. You're just sharing. Mm-hmm. You're just available for whatever the moment might have to share in the loving situation. And you're not as worried about having to hold something back because you don't want to send the wrong message or, create a connection you're not sure you're ready to make or, all that stuff. So it's kind of interesting, I think, depending on where you are in your life and sort of like the relationship status or like what those things are that might determine how willing you are to just like let it all hang out, so to speak.
Yeah. It's nice when it's like what you're talking about is getting to a point of where vulnerability becomes a way of being more than something you have to consciously put out there or make happen.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like you're not forceful about it, but you're actually almost grounded enough to be able to let that vulnerability show a little bit, and I think that's been a really big blessing for me having had Adam and having our relationship is just having that freedom to just kind of be more present with people, because it's like, you're not entering into that situation looking for a dating experience or like a emotional connection on that level. You almost just get to say like, who are you as a person? Like you get to open yourself up to that vulnerability a little bit more easy, And so I think it's just kind of interesting to discover in different times of your life and in different places, like how open or how quote unquote closed you will be with people.
Yeah, and I'm sure when you bring that kind of energy into a connection too, you're essentially creating a safe space for someone to be
Yes.
vulnerable with you.
Yeah.
Which
Yes.
is something I teach people how to do. It's actually something you can cultivate intentionally. But it seems like what you're talking about is just really more of just a way of being.
Yeah.
Just bringing that energy. That's something that's really profound. I think it's more rare than people think it is.
Yeah.
I
Because vulnerability is kind of trendy, right? It's
Right.
trendy.
Totally.
Oh,
But
it's super trendy.
But
Yeah.
then it's like, well, that sometimes that leads to just like oversharing, which is just another way of being needy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, someone please acknowledge me for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right? It's so
I'm
true.
being so vulnerable right now. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
sharing all my baggage on date
Yeah,
number
yeah.
one.
Yeah, give me a cookie. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up because there is a real culture around oversharing right now. And it's great. It's beautiful. Like, I love that people are really trying to cultivate that authenticity and allow themselves to be more raw. But there is a sense of like, oh, I know when I talk more about how, like, I don't like how saggy my boobs are, I get more legs or whatever, you know what I mean? Or like there's a thing around it now, and you're like, oh, it's very interesting to watch that and just see, like, just kind of notice that, how that is now.
Yeah, it's and social media has changed that a ton, and it's a slippery slope, right? It is really wild to see that.
Yeah.
I know one trend that's happening a lot now that I'm actually really abundant support of is explants. Like women getting their breast implants taken out because of implant sickness and stuff. And that was a friend of mine just had that done.
Interesting.
She's actually the host of the Motherhood Unstressed podcast, and she was sharing that. I thought that was something that was really rad because
That
that's
is very cool.
It's more like a step away from external validation and a step towards health because there's a lot of issues. You can't think that you're going to put a foreign substance into your body in that way and not
Right.
yield some kind of consequences.
Yeah.
You know, it's a wild deal, but it's
I also think it
funny.
probably has a lot to do with innately how comfortable you are with it, because I think the body probably senses, okay, is this really part of us or is this a foreign invader? And I think if there's an internal conflict that you have about it, you probably create more of a response to it with your body.
that is next level
Right?
emotional thinking.
Yeah,
You
really.
just blew my mind.
But because I do, it's like, why do some women have them and they have no issues and they seem to just really like embrace them as part of their physique, and then other women really have all of this struggle around it? And I think that there is probably just like a subconscious piece of it where it's like, how do you truly feel about having those things inside of you?
Yeah.
Wow. The
Yeah,
things
I've-
that we put inside of ourselves.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like, that could be the
a whole
name of
other
this podcast,
podcast.
actually.
I think I actually said that on an Instagram post one day. I said,
Yeah.
the things you do with your mouth say a lot about who you are as a person.
True.
So many innuendos.
It's really true, though.
So
It's like
true.
open-ended, but super true. Yeah, I've got this piece of metal in my eye that's been in there for a really long time, and it's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not bothered by it. It doesn't bother me. It's just there. You know?
It's like your new friend. It's,
It's
like,
like a-
it's
yeah.
a nice addition to you.
means I don't get MRIs, you know, which is fine. But it's there, you know?
So talk about your relationship coaching that you're doing. You're doing dating coaching. I want to hear a little
Yeah.
bit about that process and how you got inspired to do that. And let's hear about it.
So it's really funny. I've said this a few times now. I haven't started doing anything that I wasn't already doing. So with lifestyle design, and I work with a lot of women, and
Yeah.
I think it's funny because speaking of being feminine, like it's just a little bit more willing to ask for help.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
From someone who's assertive and honest and also compassionate. Actually, you guys familiar with the Big 5 aspect scale? That Jordan Peterson puts it
Oh,
out. It's
yeah.
his test, but he tests things
Yes.
like empathy, compassion, industriousness,
Yeah.
all that kind of fun stuff. And I rank in like the 98th percentile for compassion, but in the second percentile for politeness. It's like
That's an
it
interesting
actually makes a lot
combo.
of sense when I'm a coach. Actually, I'm like, I
Yeah.
really care, but I'm not going to bullshit you.
But I'm going
Yeah,
to give it
yeah.
to you straight. Yeah.
Exactly. And so with a lot of the women that I was working with, the first 8 weeks through the lifestyle design program that I run, and it's 8 weeks every week, we're doing a lot of work. The ones that were signing up for extended work, it wasn't because they were lacking sense of fulfillment. Now it was more, how do I make connections? Like dating, it was dating strategy. Like what, I feel like I'm getting my own way here, or I'm dating the same guy over and over again. And as a guy, we have
Yeah.
a shit ton of context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
Totally.
oh, I know what guys want because I grew up as this fat kid who couldn't talk to girls, who was super cumbersome, ended up being, completely ridiculously outlandish just to get attention in some way. And I was observing, like, why does this girl like that guy? Why does that guy like this girl? Like, I was almost like looking at social dynamics in junior high,
Right.
without knowing what I was doing, just because I wanted to have friends.
Yeah. Well, how did they do it?
How does this work
How
out?
does
And it's
it
like, maybe
work?
because you're like a foot taller than everybody else and outweigh most people by like 85 pounds.
Right,
I was
right.
like, you're essentially very intimidating as a human being, but I didn't understand that at the time. And just really wanted to fit in, you know, so
Sure.
going through that process my experience up to this point has really given me a shit ton of context and a lot of understanding of how to actually communicate and recognition of patterns. And a lot of times that's the thing you'll see, like, there's no good guys out there, or I keep dating douchebags, or no one I can never meet someone, you know. And it becomes really very practical, but it's something that I felt really drawn to do because I was doing it anyways. People were having great success with it. I noticed how it impacted my clients and myself, like how much fulfillment I got out of somebody having a healthy relationship, or just feeling more confident in creating connections that have nothing to do with romance, just making new friends, and just like we were talking about earlier, being seen as who they believe that they are.
Right.
I think a lot of times in life you can close the gap between how you're perceived and how you feel that you are as a person. That's alignment, almost like this community alignment where people recognize you for the things that you value about yourself. But step one is understanding what you value about yourself and how to communicate those.
Yeah.
Right. So
How is it, like, how do you get people to close that gap or I mean, I can see where seeing what you value about yourself is like there's a practice around that, but how do you start to gain more of an intuition around how people perceive you?
Yeah, so intuition is the key word there. That's something we work on a ton. So I ask people in the journaling practice we do, and journaling is for me the most reliable form of I would not say meditation, but it's like a doing practice. It's a really reliable practice because when you use the word manifest in the actual literal definition, like you're manifesting your thoughts onto a page, and a page doesn't judge you. So you're actually seeing your thought process and what you really believe. And if you do it long enough, you'll get through kind of the mental chatter, and you'll start to see things and see the patterns in your own belief systems and your own thoughts. And one of the questions I ask people, and I find that prompts, I mean, being able to ask yourself really great questions is something that takes years to cultivate, but is so powerful. Can I be honest with myself and ask myself really challenging and honest questions? Ask people how they're being seen. Like, how are you being seen? And just almost taking the observer role. So standing outside of your normal interactions and just seeing how you engage with other people, what's your body language, how do people change and interact with you, on a consistent basis? What are the common denominators?
Yeah.
Because you're in charge of your life. Like, you're the common denominator in every aspect of your relationship.
Totally.
You know, besides from really your parents and early stuff like that, like, you didn't choose your parents, but there's a lot of patterning there, right?
Yeah.
So after taking the observer role and looking at how you're being seen and what patterns exist and the way people communicate with you, treat you, like if you've had 3 or 4 really narcissistic boyfriends, the question you have to ask yourself is, why are you a good fit for narcissistic boyfriends?
Yeah.
Right? It's not about them at that point.
Right.
And then from there, we look at where are you trying to fulfill external expectations from early on, right? That are so deeply ingrained that you just don't really even notice them anymore.
Yeah.
They're
you don't
habitual.
remember them not being there.
Exactly. But it's really profound when you can start to see, oh shit, I've been doing this for ever, you know, and I haven't ever tried anything different. And one of the guys that I worked with, after talking for a few sessions, he'd been dating the same girl since he was 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And trying to fix that relationship from 20 years or 10 years ago.
Oh, like literally the same girl.
No, sorry.
Oh.
The same version,
Same
the
version.
same
Yeah, I
girl,
got it.
just
Yeah.
different people.
Yeah.
But it was
Right,
exactly
right.
same family,
Right.
same career style. So
Yeah.
it was hilarious. And then he was about 30, so it'd been about 15 to 16 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, just go like date a yoga teacher or something, bro. Like there's lots of different
Mix
types
it
of,
up.
you know, you're not happy because you're just doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Just try something else. And I think the hit for him, it was he didn't really want to be challenged, or he had already made his mind up. And that a lot was like his parents think like, you need to have this type of girlfriend that mirrors this type of relationship
Right.
that my parents have, because that's successful, and I've in my own fantasy of my imagination have made that out to be the ideal relationship, which if you actually look behind the curtain, it was probably as messy as any
Yeah,
relationship.
pretty standard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty standard relationship. And then you recreate that in your life.
Yeah.
So a lot of it comes down to breaking patterns. And then from there it gets very strategic as far as like, well, how do you meet people? Where are you meeting people? Are you do you practice communicating with people you don't know and stuff like that? So it's really fun.
Do you encourage people to go the dating app route, or do you encourage them to branch out, or like what's the actual practicality of that?
It 100% depends on the person. So that's something that's very valuable, or it's variable depending on the situation. Younger people dating apps are a lot. They're more socially accepted. So if someone's 26, 27, it's much more. You're used to that style. Like you're used to Instagram. You're used to social media apps. So it's really just it is a social media app. I think the difference is the mindset isn't that much different. It's just you have to take things way less personally on a dating app.
Yeah.
Because people are going to ghost you. Like actually, so I use Bumble exclusively. I think I say. Tinder is Tinder is the Walmart of dating apps. It's just like
so they're currently not sponsoring your podcast.
No,
I take it.
Actually, but Bumble can cut that check at any point because I give them shout outs all the time.
Okay, got it.
No, but Bumble is like Target.
Okay, yeah. Everyone loves
Like you might
Target.
find something you actually want at Target.
Yeah.
Right.
You might find something you really need at Target.
Yeah. Well,
And you're probably not going to get assaulted in the parking lot.
yeah.
Right.
It's true. Yeah. Well, the Target in Culver City is kind of it's a different situation,
yeah.
but it's a
Location
good general statement. Yeah. We'll just throw the Culver
Well, at least
City.
it fits the demographic of the area.
Yes, yeah.
But it is different, right? So sometimes it is helpful people to have that space where you get to just have interactions, but people are going to stop talking to you and ghost you and fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Like you just have to. And one thing I love about Bumble is that if someone doesn't talk to you in a day, they just disappear. It's like they never existed, which is nice. So if you match with so you have to match and the girl goes first, which I think is really empowering. And it's funny because then there's a lot of dynamics to go along with that too. But if someone doesn't say anything, or if you don't say anything, if you're just busy, like you don't get overwhelmed with like Match.com. It's just like messages and people are just sending you stuff all the time. There's a lot less unsolicited dick pics on Bumble than any other dating app. Yeah, which is something I'm still don't really truly understand.
It's so weird.
I mean, I can see it with a partner.
Yeah,
that's funny and
sure,
fun.
Yeah.
But it's always. I'm not gonna lie, I've done it.
Yeah.
But it's
Me
fun.
too,
It's
no.
for joke. It's for jokes.
Yeah.
It's like,
But it's different when you have a relationship and you have there's a context. If it's like if you're opening with that, you're like, where's this supposed to go?
yeah. It's like you're already really associated with that part of my body, anyways. Like, this isn't a surprise to you as to what's going on here. Like, I'm not like showing off the goods. Like what you're getting yourself into. But dating app is really but it's only one. It's never that by itself, right? So one of the most empowering things we have people do is just get used to talking to people you don't know. Baristas, waiters, waitresses, somebody that's just happens to be standing next to you.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that's somebody that you want to sleep with or date or any of those kind of things.
Sure.
It's just getting used to breaking the ice.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't really want to talk to you, and so they're kind of assholes. But that's okay, because that's going to happen in real life too. But I don't want to say it's a numbers game, but you do have to get used to communicating with a lot of people. And if you find somebody you resonate with, and this is where intuition becomes a huge part of it, is when you can start to feel that you resonate with somebody, even if it's not romantic. That's a connection, and connections lead to more connections, and it becomes very genuine. But when you're coming from a place of need, neediness is not sexy at all.
Yeah.
Certainly isn't. Yeah.
And also being unclear on what you want or projecting your wants onto someone else. Like one of the most common things I see, this wears me out, is when you meet someone and then you already project the future that you had just pre-decided on before meeting them onto a guy. This is for women specifically. Guys do it too, but more often you'll see this with women. It's like you have a trajectory of your life, which is like this many kids, this is what it's going to look like. And then you meet a guy who you like, and then you expect him to all of a sudden adhere to your future plans.
Right.
That's not how it works.
It's not, but it's like, but you can take a great connection with somebody and just beat it to death.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious because I think especially with the dating apps and with just the high accessibility we have to quote unquote connection, which is really not connection. But I feel like, a lot of people are more addicted to the game. Like they're not really out there looking for deep connection or really looking for like that special person. Like, what do you do when someone's coming to you for relationship advice, but you're like, dude, you're addicted to the game? I don't know. Like,
what depends? Because it can come from a couple different places, right? I mean, I speak for myself. Like, I'm most in the past year or so, I've been mostly casually dating, but I've also haven't been living in one place for extended period of time. So there's casual dating is not by any means low emotional investment.
Oh no.
People think that it is, right? And it can be, but if it's low emotional investment for you, that means you're really not connecting at all. That means you're just kind of treating people like shit.
Right.
And that's a whole other conversation. I don't think people that are in that world really are looking for help, you know, or looking for a conversation. They're just kind of unconsciously floating through, you know, the fuck fest of their life.
Right.
Sometimes people get really attached to the idea of what the game is, right? Literally the game or whatever, like, you know, the pickup artist type of guys.
Yeah.
And there's less and less of those. And those guys come from a place of lack in general. Like they just haven't ever had attention. They haven't had attention as a guy. And I totally get that. It was like, I was obsessed with this for so long because I just couldn't figure it out. But usually when someone's coming for help or wants help with this is that they actually don't know how. It's like, well, but if we sleep together on the first time we meet and then things that fall flat, it's like, well, you've kind of painted yourself into a corner there, but that's all you know how to do.
Right.
And like from the outside, it looks like you're addicted to the game, but you really just don't know how to create connection via conversation or being just patient because, especially if you're attractive, you kind of just get what you want. And if you're searching for validation, it's usually not the game. It's usually you trying to be validated for something, especially if you're attractive or can get it easy. It's generally avoidance. And it may be very socially valued, right? If a guy is always hooking up with chicks and whatever, like there's a community piece of that. So you're getting valued or really validation from a lot of different angles, but internally there's a conflict because it's kind of run its course in your life. And not to say that if you want to casually date, that's totally fine. And being clear about that is super helpful. And you can do it in a way that's not harmful to other people, but it seems like that addiction to the game, just like any other addiction, it comes from a place of lacking, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's such a wild world out there in terms of dating now. Like there's so many, I mean, on one hand, obviously it's still just connection between two people or however many people you want to involve. But at the end of the day, it just feels like there's a lot of inputs, you know, there's a lot of places and ways that people are supposed to be on at all times and sort of navigating this, you know, this world of like being attractive and being funny and being pretty and being all of these things at once all the time to everybody everywhere they go. And it seems like a complicated situation.
Well, it is. And you say that, and then but on the other end of that, it's so nice to have a place where you can be vulnerable in yourself and not wear makeup and do your thing and be in sweatpants. And like that's I think it's really what everybody's looking for because now more than ever we have to, especially if you're in the world that we all live in, it's like you've got to be something all the time.
Yeah.
You know, you've always got, and even if you're like me and your brand is authenticity, that means I've got to be as best I can authentic all the time. And it's like, can I just like watch Netflix? Just watch something I'm not telling somebody about on my podcast, right? And that's something that people, I think a lot of times don't realize that they need because they're being told, well, these are the social markers that are valuable, right? Money, status, fill in the blank. And we don't ever say like, oh, well, being genuine and connected to somebody in your personal life is actually as valuable, if not more valuable, because all other shit doesn't matter if that's not a component of your life.
Yeah.
I love it, man. This is good advice. I feel like callers out there are ready to like dial up and get some more.
Nailing it.
Get the realness.com.
Exactly. So I want to talk a little bit about recently you did an ayahuasca retreat. You had a really amazing experience. I know you have experience with plant medicine, but just talk a little bit about how that has shifted some of your focus or the kind of impact that that's made on you in general.
This last time, so my ayahuasca experience up until this point was much different. So I had 3 ceremonies back to back, typical American, you know, the gringo ceremonies. I was actually in Austin, out in the hill country, and those were super profound for me. It wasn't ideal of a setup, and I wouldn't do it that way again. But it was like Friday you show up in the afternoon. Friday night you're drinking the brew. Saturday, Sunday, and then you go home, and I'm like, I'm in the gym. I'm in the gym on Monday afternoon. I get back to the gym, and I'm sitting on a plyo box, just like.
What happened?
You guys know what to do. I don't know. Figure it out. Like, I'll make sure no one dies. I'm piecing my life back together.
Right.
And then I did it once in Peru, which was a very mild experience. And then we were more experimenting with experiencing other plant medicines while we were there. And this time was in Costa Rica at Soltara. And I feel like this was the setup, the preparation. Of course, I'm a little older now. I don't do this stuff often. This isn't something, I don't take it lightly. I think it's been. The first time I did it was about almost 4 years ago now. So I'm doing like one every 1.25 years. Right?
Yeah.
I'll do a retreat. So this last time was at Soltara, and Costa Rica, first off,
Dude.
amazing. I
Yeah.
prefer that, and just the energy there is way different. It's a way different vibe.
So softer and just, yeah.
And the travel's so much easier. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. It's like, here, fly to San Jose and then get on this bus, and then 3 hours you're in the jungle at the retreat center, and it's fantastic. Versus like Lima to Iquitos to a boat to
Right.
which has its own like magic, but just on sheer logistics.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
easier.
totally.
But it was a beautiful place. The food was incredible, and we just had such a strong community that was already there, and the facilitators. There was 2 healers, and they're both from Peru, from the Shipibo tradition, and they rotate from the same community. They're actually neighbors in the same community, and they rotate
Nice.
every few months. So they all live permanently in Peru, and then they come up to Costa Rica for a quarterly type of switch. So it's cool because you get the same exact lineage, tradition, but different healers every quarter, pretty much.
Oh, cool.
So it's really rad. And Teo and Medina were down there with us. They were the healers. And then we have 5 facilitators, and then somebody on the door for 20 people. So you're about 1 to 4 ratio, which I thought was super responsible. There's
amazing.
4 or 5 bathrooms
Yeah.
that are really nice.
Yeah.
And a shower right there too, like outside of that Maloka. It was like one of those things. I'm like, this is. I remember the first time that ayahuasca, I had to go to the bathroom, and I went into the hallway, and I thought the hallway was about 6,000 miles long. I was like, bro, you know that the bathroom is like 6 steps.
Just
Keep
take
going.
them.
And then I forgot where I was at when I was coming out of there. I'm like, wait, what am I doing here? What planet am I on?
Yeah.
So it was really nice to have that set up. And to give you the kind of the short story, the first night, the big thing was they give you kind of a first date dose is what I'm calling it, where it's a 3/4 dose. You don't get a chance for any second cups, and you're really just figuring out without being super out there, which there's a lot of purging, and it is a pretty profound experience, but you're not out of body completely in my experience, but you're getting to see how the ceremony works. That way, you're not in an unfamiliar environment when you do more.
When you go deeper, yeah.
Exactly. So we had 4 ceremonies over the week. And the biggest thing with me was that, this is actually kind of nice in the context of dating. I'll give you the full wraparound. We'll go full circle here. So this girl came into my vision. I'm going to kind of get emotional about this now. And it's a girl that I met. It was the South by Southwest. It was almost 2 years ago. Was my mom, my grandmother who raised me since I was 5. She passed away, and then my girlfriend at the time broke up with me on the same day as the funeral. When we got back from the funeral, and then I got fired 4 days later from my dream job. And right before I got the Thursday before I got fired or whatever, that week before was St. Patty's Day, and it was South by Southwest in Austin. So I was in lowest of low, and it was I didn't know I was about to get dealt another blow a few days later. I got fired, right? I was already feeling like shit. And I met this girl. We saw each other on the street, and we made eye contact, and then took a few steps, and made eye contact again, and then she walked past me, and we both looked back at the same time. So she ends up going to one place, a little food joint on Rainy Street in Austin. There's a bunch of people out, and we end up going to this other place where we have friends, and I was there for maybe 15 minutes, and I was like, I have to go back. So I go back and meet this girl. We ended up having a great weekend. She was just, it was so nice to be seen and appreciated and feel like someone wanted to just spend time with me in that moment. And it was so, it really gave me a lot of context for what I deserve in connection. So she came up in the ayahuasca experience, out of nowhere, which is we've stayed in touch, but was kind of random. And I remember just having this overwhelming urge to just tell her thank you.
Aww.
And then I appreciate, as small as she was in my life, as little of a role she had in my life, it really did impact me so much. Because I would think about that a lot. And then it was another girl I dated a few months later that was just so sweet to me, and that was after everything had happened. So I was really just needed. It was so amazing, and she's floated into my life, and I was like, man, this stuff was not an accident.
Yeah.
So I got to tell her hey, thank you.
Aww.
And then it became from I would say acquaintances and people I knew a little bit into 30, 40 people throughout my life, into my family, and it was just I got to say all the things I needed to say.
Yeah.
And just thank you, I'm sorry, I appreciate you. I wish I could have been this for you, but my brothers. I wish I could have been a better brother, and I really tried my best. Just things that you wouldn't normally say, and that now in life I get to say those things to people, and it crosses my mind to say them in real time.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild.
That's I mean, that's pretty legit. You know what I mean? As like a thing to come away with, you know, and that's a pretty serious
like the
skill.
intro ceremony.
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is gonna be impactful.
Wow.
And then, you know, the biggest takeaway from the next 2 nights was, I'll try to make this story as short as I can, but how do I explain this? So I was sitting there in that same experience. So a lot of this had to do with that time in my life, and I was really doing a lot of work on that, 2-week span where all of that had happened. And that came up again. And also I grew up when my parents were addicts. My dad's actually in prison still to this day. He's been in for about 5 years. We haven't had a close relationship. He's kind of been like a friend to me. He's like a cool like uncle dude. Right. He's actually my dad.
Yeah.
But he's kind of like a really charismatic, irresponsible asshole. But I like love the shit out of him. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing, you know.
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up with him, and where was I going with that? But I've always had like some circumstance in my life, and then I was like a fat kid, and I was bullied, and all this other stuff, and then this crazy my grandmother dying and breakup firing thing all at one time. And I remember seeing all of it at one time. You know what? You can kind of see so much of it at once. Like it's all one thing. And this voice goes, "You've got to let that go."
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how. She goes, "You've got to quit being a victim." And I was like, well, then who am I?
Yeah.
I was like, and it was me watching myself have that conversation. It was my voice and this other voice, and I was actually just observing it happen. And she goes, "Well, if you want to be a victim, I'll show you what it's like to be a victim." And for the next 3 hours ish, you name it, starved to death, Holocaust victim, Vietnamese person getting killed by American soldiers, like innocent human beings, rape, murder, prison camps, like name it.
Yeah.
And I was the whole time I was thinking, I don't want to die like this. And like feeling what it's like to literally starve to death. I mean, in my vision, that's what I didn't even know who I was anymore. And just feeling what it's like to be so confused and scared and not wanting to die like that. Like knowing you're going to die and not wanting to die like that. It was this crazy experience. And my intention going into that night was show me my heart. And I just had been feeling that was coming up for me. So I come out of that and like feel my left arm. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm back.
I still exist.
I was like, oh, I'm Connor. Cool. Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Hey, Connor, how's it going? You know? And I started feeling my left arm, and I've been crying this whole time and having just this really challenging experience. And I don't vomit very often. I've only had that happen once in one ceremony. But I purge in different ways. Like it's super gassy and burps and laughing and crying and shaking and a lot of sweating. And I remember feeling up my left arm. And throughout this whole time, I'm like, what the hell does this have to do with my heart? When I would like kind of come back to it, I'm like, this is not what I asked for. Ayahuasca, please.
You gave me the wrong order.
Fill me in on what this has to do with anything. So I start feeling up my left arm, and I'm like just grateful of my arm, you know? And then I go to my shoulder and then my chest, and I start feeling my heartbeat. And I sit with that for probably 30 seconds and didn't think or say a thing and just listened to it. And then was just overwhelmed with gratitude for just being alive, for every fucking heartbeat.
Yeah.
And it was something, for someone, and through that whole experience where that victimhood experience, like the thought of checking out, like seriously, like crossed my mind. Like I knew how I would do it. And like, it was like to think that I actually had a storage unit in Austin, I had a pistol in there, and I did one I've had for a while, and I wouldn't go to my storage unit because I didn't want to make an excuse to take that home with me.
Oh wow!
Like that's where my mindset was.
Yeah,
wow.
And to think that something that I have, I'm so grateful to have in this moment. I even considered like ending that.
Yeah,
was so much for me. And then we walk up to the star deck after that night and just look, half the sky is clouds and half is just the most beautiful stars, and the moon comes up as like an upside down crescent moon with like it's orange, and the stars are shining through the clouds, and they're making this like almost like orbs, and we're just like, holy fucking shit, man. Like this is something special. And that I remember walking out to my buddy Mike Salemi. I don't know if you guys have met him. He's a kettlebell expert. You should definitely have him on the podcast. He's one of my retreat partners. And I remember the first thing I did was I got a piece of watermelon, and I walked up to him, and he was looking at me, and I said, this night changed my fucking life, dude. And those are really the two real big takeaways from our 4 ceremonies. I turned into a wolf for a little while, but that was kind of like this random, just like
Just a
thing.
sidebar.
And you get to do this too. You're like, all right, cool.
But that girl that I was telling you about, the blonde or the girl from South by Southwest, actually had breakfast with her this morning.
Oh, that's amazing.
So we've been hanging out again, which is
So she
weird.
lives here?
She lives in LA.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So do you find that you are much more vocal about giving appreciation to people? And did you even take some of those things that you cleared up with people in your vision into real life?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I did. We did a podcast after each ceremony, so it's into 2 shows. We split it like 4 hours worth of content, so we split it into 2 shows. So we did an intention episode, and then we talked about these on each one. And then if I brought this up I was using social media for the power of good, I guess. So I told some of these shorter stories on Instagram TV, and actually was able to send them to some of these people that I had experienced.
Awesome.
Like, hey, like you came up in this experience. And that sparked a conversation. That's actually how she and I started talking again.
Wow.
Because she didn't know all of this stuff, right?
Sure.
She didn't know what I didn't tell her anything because I was just so happy to be hanging out and having. It just was so. It seemed. That's one thing about connection, for example, like we were talking about earlier, is you just never know how valuable a small connection can be for you.
Yeah. You
Just
really
being
don't know
open
what
to that.
people are going through at any time.
At any time, and something can just shift your mind just a little bit, just 1 degree, and change your whole fucking life.
Wow.
So openness to experience and stuff like that has been really, really impactful for me in my life. But like you're saying, coming back and being able to acknowledge people for that in real time is something that shift in my life has been huge.
And is that one of the things that you would say has been a lasting effect?
100%. Yeah.
Because I know, obviously everything is such a blast off and you get so many amazing downloads, but sometimes the lasting effects wear off. So what else has been lasting for you after that last experience?
The victim piece. I mean, really the first one, just acknowledging people was very practical, but the victim piece is more about how like my physical body changed more this time than ever before.
Oh, wow.
Like I had a feeling the second night wasn't a lot. There's some little things to take away, but it was more feeling like I just got wrung out like a wet towel. It was just like, and it was like my DNA got scrubbed off, you know? And if you're familiar with people like Gabor Mate and books like The Body Keep the Score, right? Like there's a lot of trauma gets stored in your body.
Totally.
And let's not even use the word trauma because that's kind of triggery. Like there's information gets stored in your physical body.
Yeah.
And that, like my back doesn't even hurt anymore. And I've had back issues since I was 19 years old. Like that's why I quit playing college football. So it's like, it's just one of those things where my physical presence and just the letting go of that victim piece, I've almost like that was keeping me from being more grounded and capable. And since then, things have shifted. Group lifestyle design, the dating coaching piece, putting together things, like just feeling so much more capable because I always had this fucking little trump card in the back of my mind that's like, well, if I fuck everything up and fail, I can always have an excuse because I was a victim. Because well, this happened. If this wouldn't have happened, then I could have done it. And I've been able to use that my entire life. I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that card anymore. I like this fish card much better.
The fish card's way better.
Well, it's actually really important information because I think people don't even, like when they hear you say that, can probably identify with a piece of them that knows deep down inside they're doing the same thing, but wouldn't have even known to vocalize it or think of it in that regard. And it's like, it's so important to recognize that you can recreate your story at any time. We all come in with trauma or information, whatever that is, but you really can take responsibility for your story moving forward if you decide, if you so choose to, And so I think that's really, that's really important information for people to hear.
For sure. Well, and then you have to, like, if you really actually want to progress, whether it's nutrition or just some relationship stuff or like whatever it is, like it starts with owning it, being like, I'm not the guy that can have cookies in the house, It's like, if I'm not gonna eat cookies, they can't be in this house. You're like, and then of course it all peels back to like, well, why is what's up with your impulsive behavior or whatever, but like getting rid of that trump card, like you said, that's the thing, Yeah.
I mean, last thing we need is more excuses. That's to not take ownership. And then with that, you can also let go, because sometimes you create unrealistic expectations for yourself with the understanding you're probably not going to achieve them, and then you're going to shame yourself, and it's this whole shame piece too. And you got to make up for that down the road. It just becomes this cycle of just bullshit, and it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Yeah.
You know?
Man, that's such a big one. That's something that I have definitely struggled with, and like still. I think it's definitely getting better, but like in my last job, I used to think about this, because like there's a weird thing about driving to an emergency, like the time from when the tones go off and you receive the call to when you're driving to whatever it is, if it's a fire or whatever. There's a tremendous amount of stuff going on, like chemically, and like you're thinking about everything that that you need to do. You're listening to the radio to update everything, so there's just all this, everything is on while you're doing it. And I used to find that there was like an area of my RAM, like one little partitioned piece of hard drive space that was set aside for, what am I going to say if this gets fucked up? And it's like, it would just spin over there, and you're like, oh, well, let's see. So I was going, and let's see, like something happened with my truck, or I couldn't hear one of the radios, or, and you start going through this shit. And it was like, probably only 5 years ago that I like recognized that as like eating up space, and started to kind of look into it a little bit. And I was like, man, this is a really fucked up way to go about this, and I would justify it to some degree as, well, you always have to think about, if things go wrong, this is part of your job. As a chief officer, you've got to be prepared for the contingency, and the contingency's contingency, and then, and all of this stuff. So yeah, use that space for this, But like what it was really doing was like justifying my failure, in the event that it happened, and
before
it
even happened.
Yeah. You're like, what a shitty way to like, think positively.
Yeah, right. It's like, let me go ahead and just but then it takes the pressure off, I guess. But then it leads to shame. You're not going to be any less ashamed of yourself, and you're going to forget those things in the event that you do fail.
Totally,
they're not going away.
And then exactly. And then and in what reality is somebody going to buy that bullshit? You know what I mean? And you're like, oh well,
you're going to. That's an important part.
Yeah, like this thing happened, and you're like, fuck.
God, I got a friend like that from my hometown. Don't you love going back to your hometown and you're like, wow. Like you guys live here.
Yeah. Yeah, dude,
I got a friend like
intense.
that, and I was like, man, you were all. I remember just having this thought, and I feel bad for him now because his life is just complete and utter shit. And he's the only people that can say that. Like most of my buddies, like even if they're doing something different, I would never put that judgment on anyone else. But I was like, but you weren't always an asshole, and you always had excuses for everything you did wrong, and it was always somebody else's fault. And I want to give you a hug and tell you everything's gonna be okay because I really think it is. But damn, dude, like. You are that part of your brain that you were talking about, like that was his whole brain,
right.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's so hard to see that. And I had that little epiphany when I was driving to California from Texas, and I just had a lot of time to think, and I was thinking about that exact thing. 'Cause I had the same deal. It's like even in weightlifting, when I was a competitive weightlifter, or in football or whatever, that's really easy. It's not. It's very specific, just like going to a scene, right? Like it's high pressure.
Yeah.
I would say your pressure was more than mine because lives are at stake.
Well, but the brain doesn't.
But it does the same thing. But when it's subtle, that's why even at the end of the day with the dating coaching stuff, that's just everything under a microscope.
Yeah.
The gym is everything under a microscope. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a dating coach because I want people to get laid and have healthy relationships. Like I want people to connect themselves and express themselves more fully, and getting rid of that. Like, well, what am I going to say to my parents who are going to be super disappointed if this relationship fails?
Right.
While the relationship is fine.
Yeah. Everything's going great, but I'm going to plan for it not. Yeah.
Let me plan. Well, he was kind of like this, and then you start creating the possibility for those things to happen and noticing those things more because you have context, more context on them.
Right.
And then
sending more energy to
I think
it.
it's called self-sabotage.
Yeah, well, I think that might be the term for it. Yeah, well, it's really interesting to hear that too, because like what you're saying about the dating and relationship coaching really being a lever that's like you're using to fundamentally shift people's lives, in general. I mean, we find the same thing, and I'm sure you did too at the gym. How much time do you actually spend coaching on the deadlift versus just dealing with people and helping them through whatever they're going on, whatever you're doing for the day. Like I remember it being like one of the most surprising things to me that like somehow being a certified personal trainer also qualifies me to be a therapist.
Yeah,
You're like, what the hell? How did I get into this role?
It just shows how people just need someone, would love someone to listen to them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know what that is, though? I don't think, we always make that joke about the therapy piece.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is, and like, I'm not a psychologist.
Right.
And I was actually talking about this today because my buddy John introduces me to, it was like the high power people that we were sitting at this table with. It was a Taro from Four Sigmatic and people that are really rad.
Yeah.
And he was like, this is my buddy Connor. He's a life coach. And I was like, please don't ever fucking say that to people. And he's like, and he got a nose ring in his 30s. It's fine. And I was like, okay, bro. I was like, you have a grill on. Come on. But it was funny. And it was like, the thing about it is, and this is what I tell people, it's like, I have strategies. And I've been in the personal development game through coaching because I started reading personal development books. And whether it was Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins and Simon Sinek back then, I was just understood people needed some kind of connection. But I think the best thing I can offer people, and I always say this no matter what I'm doing, is a judgment-free space to express yourself, and just somebody whose only interest in your life is for you to live the best life that you want for yourself and by your own terms.
Yeah.
And everybody's got an agenda for you. Partner, parents, your work, especially your work people. Like their number one priority is you getting your job done, not you being fulfilled in your life.
Right.
So just having someone in your personal trainer is kind of in your corner. Like they want you to do a good job, and sometimes that's the only person someone has that's truly in their corner.
Yeah.
And there's so much stigma. I mean, the idea of going and becoming an actual counselor or therapist is in my mind all the time. And the reason I don't do it isn't because I would love it, I'm sure, but there's a stigma around that it feels like you have to have come to terms with your brokenness, not just somebody who wants some help, you know, just wants a little context and someone to bounce some shit off of them. And that can back that up with the information and the practices and the structure and knows their shit. Yeah. It's interesting. Like the coaching world is so interesting, you know?
Well, it's more because, so it's almost like, I mean, we used to see this a lot with PTSD, and we called it critical incident stress management because you needed more acronyms. You know, is this CISM or PTSD we're dealing with? You're like, pick your poison. But they built this whole system. I'm not sure who they are, but the way that it works in that context is peer to peer. So they almost never, unless there's a really significant thing going on, bring in a mental health professional. Like there's always one that's overseeing and training and kind of like there to refer people to. But they keep it all on a peer-to-peer level for exactly that reason. It's like, I'm not going to go see a therapist, but I'll talk to somebody that I feel like has context for what it is I've experienced. You know, and that, like, at the end of the day, like, that's what's beneficial, you know, unless you're really hanging on by a thread, then you might need some help. But
people don't want to be diagnosed. They want to be related to.
Right.
Exactly.
And they just want to be supported and, like, heard. People just want to be heard most of the time. You know, that's the big thing is that, like, sometimes they don't even want you to solve or offer advice. They just want somebody that they can share what's in their space.
Have you guys, this is going to sound random, but it's not at all. Did you guys watch Californication by any chance?
Yes.
One of my favorite shows.
I love that show.
Love it.
And maybe that's why I'm a dating coach. Cause
There's a lot to be learned from that show.
There is actually.
But I watched that. I didn't watch it until like probably maybe like a little less than a year ago.
Okay,
cool. I got obsessed. But there was a part where Hank Moody, the main character, who was having sex with everyone as he usually does, had slept with the dean's wife and one of his students in his class and his TA.
Yeah.
And his daughter was like, what are you doing? Like, why? And he like made a joke, and she's like, no, you don't get to be avoidant here. Why do you have to always do this? And he goes, I want them to know how special they are. He goes, it's what everybody really wants is to be seen and heard and understood. And I literally, when he said that, I was like tearing up. I was like, because I've been there. I mean, in my like sexual prowess and whatever it may be, but it was really me, right? I just really wanted to be seen and understood. But I understood that there was like this boundary of not having a ton of judgment for people, really let people be free. And who they needed to be. And it was very liberating. It was so funny, but really that was this little profound nugget. And then of course I searched the internet. There was like tons of memes about that same quote. And I was like, people just want to be seen and understood. And that's, man, we don't get a lot of that. As much as we talk about community, like.
Right.
Oh, yeah. We're like less connected than ever, even though we're more connected than ever.
I know.
It's like, it's so confusing to our brains because we feel like we spend all day connecting, yet we don't feel connected.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have to get together in a room and pull animal cards and share conversation.
Have cacao ceremonies.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, creating these spaces to actually connect with people. And it's like, I think that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
You know, what's a weird thing that just came up for me as you said that is that that feels more vital in higher income communities.
Right.
Yeah.
Because,
I think it is.
Yeah. You don't see as much of that. And that's one thing, you know, we talk about, like, even not to go down this rabbit hole, but like systemic racism and things like that. In those communities, you don't see a lot. Now, sometimes the community can be used for wrong, right? Like the need for acceptance and there's a lot of emotional issues around like gang violence and things like that.
Totally.
But at the end of the day, that's one thing I always say I love about. We talk about like white culture, black culture, how white culture is just like sucks.
Yeah.
I was like, the community around black culture, those black culture is really prevalent as far as like community goes. And it feels like when I was talking about cacao ceremonies and pulling cards, it's a bunch of like rich white girls in a yoga studio like, pulling cards. But it's like because their whole life is being somebody that they were told to be.
Right.
And there's so many of us that were like that. It was like, this is what you need to be.
Yeah.
I don't know how it went down the racist.
Well, no, I think it's a really good point because I mean, you see it in community size.
Oh,
you know, like you see it in overall. I mean, there's the whole Dunbar's number concept around this stuff, but there's like not only community size, but then also like how stratified is your community culturally, like one way or the other. You know, and so it's like you look at, you know, like Japan is always used as an interesting like discussion around this. So it's like, what's the murder rate in Japan? It's ridiculously low. How much? how many protests are there? Like they're monolithic. You know, it's one culture fundamentally. Like I mean, obviously, you know, there's somebody who's a Japan expert would be like, no, they're not. There's this and this and this. But in comparison to like the U.S. or something, it's very, very monolithic. You know, and so I think we see this like this multifaceted aspect of culture and community where it's like if you're, you know, and I think that the black community is a really good example of this. And actually, we saw the same thing growing up, you know, in and around Indian reservations, where it's like they're oppressed, you know, but they're also probably a minority. And so within that, and those two things probably go together.
Yeah.
But you know, so within that, they're tighter and they're monolithic, and there's somebody that they're against to some degree, right? There's us and there's them, and the us is a lot tighter, you know? And so I think if you took all of the color and everything out of it, like even if you had, you know, a massive community of Anglo-Saxons, you know, in the general Northern European area, you see a similar situation where once there's an us and them, the us becomes tighter, you know? And so I think that's something that like, well, for one, I think it's what drives a lot of kind of the tribalism and stuff that we see even within our political environment. You know, it's like, well, I'm one of these, and me and my people talk about this, and you're one of those, and we hate you for whatever reason, you know? And so you just see that start to develop kind of no matter what, you know? And I think if you, like, get yourself put out into this space where there's not a lot of that, right? Where you're one of a million people, like here in LA, you're one of 20 million people who...
There's 20 million people in LA?
In the greater LA area, it's
Christ.
20 million people.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot. You know, when you're here on the coast, they're like all pushing you out to the beach, you know, which is not terrible at the end of the day. You know, but when you get mixed into that hodgepodge, so you look at LA as like 20 million people, and you're like, man, I feel really alone in this because where are my people? Where's my tribe in this? And who is my community in all of this, you know? And then you look at Facebook and you're like, where's my tribe here? You know? And so like to Vanessa's point of talking about being hyper connected, but feeling really alone, it's like, you just don't have the actual connection with somebody who, you know, so like just to go super pragmatic with it, like if you got a flat tire, who would you call? You know, it's like AAA probably, right? So you pay for a service, you pay for your community to be able to come and help you because who's here? You know, our families are all spread around. You don't have that like core group of, you know, people that I think we're used to having, you know, like as humans forever and ever, amen, to be able to lean on when shit gets weird, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys get a flat tire in the San Diego area, you can call me.
Yeah, for sure.
I just changed my own tire the other day.
You did?
And it was on an Audi, and it was a complete pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And I decided that I've already decided I wouldn't get another luxury car, but that was the nail in the nail in my tire was the nail in the coffin of that. I'm like, get me back in a Toyota with a really big a really big jack.
Yeah.
I'm over
That's
this.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're spot on. That's what sports teams are too. We find
Yeah, for
ways. We
sure.
find ways, even though it's subconscious because it's so deeply ingrained in who we are. We find ways, and even it's like, I mean, look at that's one thing I'm so stoked about for the Realness Retreat is this is 20 to 24 people coming down to a place where, not to mention the people that have founded it are friends of mine,
Right.
And now the facilitators are friends of mine, and we're super connected and we talk a lot, and then you have 20 to 24 people that are fans of the podcast or of the brand in general, who are kind of into the same stuff, and a lot of them are very, very. I'm on a phone call with everybody who's going to make sure that it's a good fit, and I'm like, this is something that's really actually unique. Like I was thinking, it would be cool to get 20 people down and give them an opportunity, and most people trust me in that my assessment of ayahuasca is very pragmatic, and I'm no bullshit when it comes to that stuff. It's not a joke. It's not a game. Like this is something that's taken very seriously, and to have a community like that, and we're actually building a lot of the retreat around the community aspect of, we're all kind of here, we're all really similar and are into the same stuff and want the same similar things out of life, even though it manifests in very different ways. I'm so excited to see that in the jungle too, where it's really pretty,
it's better. Almost everything's better in the jungle.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you
Changing
went there.
tires is not.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. Unless you're with good people, then it's a good story.
whatever.
Unless there's jaguars prowling.
Right.
I'll be fine, but you guys are. I actually had that thought when I was in Peru. I was like, I wonder if I saw a jaguar, if it would just like
recognize you.
It'd be like,
recognize
okay,
me.
we're cool.
And I was then a couple days later, I was like, no, it would eat me. It
No.
doesn't care.
I'd be like, no, you're
I was
definitely
like,
human.
that was a really silly thought.
So you just mentioned you're really excited about your retreat. What else are you really excited excited about in 2019?
Oh man, this has been a cool year. I mean, moving out here, out to the West Coast, and I'm in North County, San Diego, so I'm so stoked to be out here. And things have been moving way faster for me, and I knew that would happen. I had this gut feeling. It took me a while to get it all sorted out, and I'll tell you guys, I just really left Austin. I didn't know where I was going to go.
Yeah.
I went to Toronto for a month and Seattle for a month, and then a room opened up in the house I live in now.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, I'll move in. Cool.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect.
And it was great.
Yeah.
So just embracing all of that and letting go of the victim story was so subconscious. I intellectually was already over it. I was intellectually over it, but not physically, emotionally over it. So seeing where that goes, I'm so stoked on the dating stuff and getting the retreat together and just stepping more fully into what I've been doing. Doing a lot of video work now, which is taking up a lot of my work time is the YouTube channel and putting out stuff like this. It gets really practical and kind of making fun of all of us for the silly shit that we do content. But that feels really good, and it just feels like things are moving in a way that I like to live my life really free, and I think that's possible no matter what we do. Even if you're in a corporate job, I think you can live in alignment. And it really is I try not to use any buzzwords, but like in alignment with yourself. But I've realized that if I pull this shit off, and make this, I've been like patchworking my finances. You guys know how it goes. Like, let me make this thing work. And if I pull this thing off, I will have succeeded in creating a life where I am successful by just being myself and working my ass off. And that's a fucking win.
Awesome.
So that's what I'm most stoked on.
That's a massive win.
Because it's that overnight success that took 20
Your whole
years.
life,
Totally.
And I just want to remind you that it's already happening.
Yeah, right?
It's already happening. You're already successful. It's already happening.
I need that reminder sometimes.
Yeah, we all do, right? Because we're always like, out there, when I get there, then that's the thing. But like, look at all you've accomplished and look at just the move and all that represents. Like, there's a whole energetic shift around that. So congratulations for
Thank you.
all those big moves. Where can people find you? website, podcast, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so the podcast is called The Realness. You'll see my big mug right there on the cover image. Spotify, iTunes, it's everywhere you can get podcasts. If you want to check out the retreats, any of the coaching offerings, the dating coaching, lifestyle design, and group lifestyle design, that's at gettherealness.com. And then my personal Instagram is Connor Wanders. Connor with an E, Wanders with an A. ConnerWanders. People that spell it ConnorWondr, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Connor Wanders.
Wanders, yeah. Like
A lot of times,
Wonder, like Wonder Bread.
Yeah, like Wonder Bread. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, Wander.
Yeah.
Connor Wander. Yeah, but that's me.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us
Oh,
again.
thanks for having me back.
So great to catch up, and I'm so excited to like have you on the West Coast and be able to like drop in like this more.
I love it. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, totally. Are we going to talk about our cards?
Oh, did you?
Oh my
did
God.
you?
Yeah, I
oh,
pulled
you
a
drew
card.
one. Okay,
Anytime.
yeah, go for it.
So I got like a general card, which is interesting.
A general card?
Yeah, it's animal deities.
Oh,
Like, all of them.
The whole animal kingdom.
you
I
are
got all of
animal
them.
So you're
deities.
Simba, basically.
Basically. Well, it's funny you say that because like when we were talking about the things, my last our trip to Rhythmia, I was very much lion action going on. Like
see
it was
that.
like a whole thing, you know?
I could see that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a trip because it was like I didn't really even notice it until one of the people that was there with us was, next day we're like eating a meal or whatever, and he's telling me about watching me throwing up in a bucket at one point, and he's like, you were just doing this thing, and you just pulled your head back like you were roaring like a lion, and you just puked, and I was like, yeah, all right, that sounds about right, But I started thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, it was very, very much lion-y, which was an interesting thing. But this, so it symbolizes divinity, guidance, and wisdom. Yeah, and then there's a bunch of other stuff here.
Does it say anything like that you want to quote out of there?
Let's see. Too many people around the globe. Too many? No. Too many people around the globe. 1-0. Animals represent the first beings, the ancient ones, the all-knowing deities responsible for creating all the things and the source of strength and guidance in times of trouble or need.
I could see that.
I like that.
I'll be that guy.
Yeah. Mine's the parrot,
Oh, nice.
which feels pretty appropriate given my love for color.
Yeah, that purple hair now.
Yeah, I squawk a lot.
Covering a lot of bases.
But it says love, prophecy, verbosity, and not meditation, but mediation,
Oh, wow.
which is interesting. But
Yeah.
I feel like those are pretty good. Yeah, verbosity in general is kind of my go-to.
Yeah.
So.
That's a nice word.
It
Yeah,
is
it is
nice
a good one, huh? Yeah,
Start using that instead of she talks too much.
yeah. She's so verbose.
She's so verbose. But that's
All
good.
right.
Somebody's got to do the talking.
Someone does, and I will be that person. All right, Connor, we love you. Thank you for being
Love you
here.
guys too.
This
Thanks.
has been
Yeah,
awesome.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
That's a wrap, folks. I hope you guys liked that podcast.
Yes, we certainly did.
Yeah.
We enjoyed having a little visit with Connor and sharing a little space, few laughs,
Yeah.
and definitely a lot of smiles.
Yeah. A lot of that going around.
And if this made you smile, then one of the ways that you can share the love around the Be the Wellness podcast is you can share the episode. You can subscribe and leave a review, leave a 5-star review, preferably. And that's really the best way to show your love to the podcast and support what we're doing here. We love bringing you guests. We love bringing you content. And it makes all the difference to us when you share, comment, like, all the good things.
Yeah. All the things.
Yes.
Get it out there.
Get it out there.
Share it with the world.
Sharing is caring.
And it's something that when we think about sharing, I think, and I don't know, maybe this isn't like an experience a lot of people have. Maybe it's more us because we just are sort of in content creation world, But the reality is, so I guess what I'm getting at is like the thought might be, oh, well, I don't really have that many people to share it with. It's probably not going to make that big of a difference.
Right.
But the reality is, especially when it comes to stuff like Facebook and all of this kind of stuff, is that it actually really matters.
It really does.
It makes a massive difference. If you share it, even if you only had 5 friends on Facebook or whatever, and you share it, Facebook recognizes that someone shared it, regardless of how many people they shared it with, and it starts to upregulate the content. And
Totally.
it makes a really, really big impact
It really
when
does.
you just click that little share button.
And furthermore, like to what Adam said, to kind of just hover on that, a lot of people think that, if you have a bigger audience, then sharing is more important, but it's actually the everyday like people that are sharing, that your friends, your family, the people who know you and know what's important to you and know your mindset. If they know that you enjoyed this thing, it makes a much bigger impact than, you know, Joe Blow who has 1 million followers that maybe they don't really know as intimately. So it really makes a difference.
No, totally. And at the end of the day, who we're trying to reach are the people that you all think would resonate with our message.
Exactly.
I mean, it's so much more impactful, you know, when folks do that. So,
Absolutely.
So please do it.
So please, yes.
Please.
Please and thank you. And we'll see you next week. We love you guys.
Bye.